In an emergency situation, a few minutes of delay could mean the difference between life and death. That's why Washington state law allows emergency responders to exceed the speed limit, proceed through red lights, and disregard other traffic laws as needed. However, the law also states that emergency responders must still drive with due regard for the safety of all persons. An important point because, as we saw in 2023, the consequences of reckless driving by first responders can be tragic. Following the death of John V., the Seattle Police Department updated their internal policies, noting that officers should only respond emergent when the need outweighs the risk. The first crash we're going to look at appears to meet that standard. From August of this year, officers were responding to a domestic violence call when the first units on scene sounded like they'd run into trouble.
Speaking 2, you're coming in broken.
Give us an air.
Airs Help, Freaking 2, 601 South Washington Street.
As an officer was racing down Fifth Avenue to head to the call, he collided with the driver who had a green light.
Good evening, 91. We're just in a house-thermal collision. Vital clinical.
The officer and 2 people inside the other vehicle were injured, although not seriously. We're going to take a look at a few more crashes, and then we'll discuss who appears to have been at fault for each crash. This next collision took place on December 12th. The call was for a woman who'd been trespassed from the Walgreens, but had come back and was putting candy into her pockets. This is not a high-priority call, yet this officer makes the decision to turn on his lights and proceed through a red light without slowing down.
Robert 3.
Hey, Robert 3.
He started supervising my way for ball collision. I'm going to control checking on the other half of him. I'm at Alaska and MLK.
Received. Collision, Alaska, and okay.
In this case, there were no serious injuries that I'm aware of. Our next crash was just over a week later on Christmas Eve. This call was for a physical altercation between the manager of a business and a person who reportedly had a knife. When the call came in, the manager was holding the other person down. This would appear to meet the high priority call standard, and the officer was responding with lights and siren when he collided with another driver at Aurora and 85th.
What was it, Gene? No, I was just rocket. 85th and Aurora.
85th and Aurora.
You need to get someone else to respond to that call.
Once again, no injuries that I am aware of. Just 2 days later, on December 26th, I captured this collision downtown. I was not able to find the dispatch audio, so I don't know what kind of call they were headed to. It's also a little hard to see what happens, but it appears that the officer was proceeding through a red light and crashed into another driver.
(1051), can you start a supervisor for 3rd and Columbia for officer involved collision?
Receive any injuries?
Negative for us. Going to check the other driver.
Received. Is there a sergeant and additional unit that can respond for an officer involved collision at Tree in Columbia?
Finally, we have a bonus clip for you from Bellevue, Washington, a city just to the east of Seattle. This was on September 25th. We have a police vehicle proceeding through a red light and unfortunately colliding with the vehicle, getting knocked into another vehicle that was waiting at the stoplight. Okay, we've seen the crashes. Now let's talk about who was at fault. A lot of people think that the driver of the emergency vehicle can't be found at fault if they're responding with lights and sirens. That is simply not true. In fact, the largest personal injury settlement in Seattle's history came about because of a crash in 2016 when the driver of a Seattle Fire Department aid unit, responding with lights and siren, proceeded through a red light without slowing down and crashed into another vehicle, causing serious injuries to the driver of that vehicle. Even when responding emergency vehicle drivers have the duty to drive safely. In practice, that often means driving at a reasonable speed and slowing down to clear intersections before proceeding through red lights. Now, at the same time, drivers of non-emergency vehicles have a duty to yield when they hear sirens or see flashing lights. With that in mind, let's take a look at our first crash. Even though this officer was following policy for when to respond emergent, a replay of the crash shows that he did not appear to slow down and failed to clear the intersection before running his red light. He most likely had a siren on, but the other driver may not have been able to hear it due to the tall downtown buildings. Those same buildings also obstructed sightlines for both drivers, making it even more important that the officer slow down before proceeding through the red light. In this case, it would appear that the officer was mainly at fault for this crash. Okay, moving on to our second crash. Now on the plus side here, the officer is proceeding at a more reasonable speed through the intersection. But after clearing the southbound lanes, he cruises right through the northbound lanes. I don't know if he had a siren on or not, but the other driver likely didn't have much of a chance to see him because of the light rail station. The view is quite obstructed until you're about 100 feet from the intersection. Add to this, the car stopped in the left turn lane, and the other driver had very little time to react to the approaching police vehicle. The officer also didn't have much of a view of the other driver, which is probably why he drove into the side of their car. It is worth noting that the other driver appears to be going faster than the posted speed limit of 25 miles an hour, possibly closer to 40 based on some very rough estimating. If that driver had been traveling more slowly, this collision could have been prevented. So, in this case, I would say that liability for the collision lies on both the officer and the other driver. Okay, for this crash, we know that the officer had his siren on, because we heard it when he called dispatch to report the crash. Watching the left side of the screen, we can see a pedestrian react to the oncoming police vehicle, as well as vehicles headed west on 85th. This shows that the officer had likely slowed to make sure westbound traffic had stopped. Unfortunately, a vehicle headed eastbound did not stop and collided with his cruiser. Now in this case, I'm inclined to place all of the liability with the other driver. This officer was moving slowly, had his lights and sirens on, and other drivers were able to stop in time as he proceeded through the intersection. Furthermore, traffic approaching this intersection from the west is heading downhill, so the officer should have been easily visible as this driver neared the traffic light. Now we didn't have a good enough view of the December 26th crash to get much information, so we'll skip that one. Plus, the video's getting pretty long at this point. A few thoughts before we wrap up. It's a little concerning that we had at least 3 different officer-involved collisions in December. I say at least because there might have been more. The only reason we know about these 3 is because they happened to be captured on traffic camera. SPD doesn't regularly release crash data, at least that I'm aware of. Most of the information we do get about officer-involved collisions comes from OPA reports that are occasionally released. That's how a local publication learned about an officer who, in their 7-year career, has been in 10 different crashes, 8 of which were deemed preventable. I've linked to that article in the video description. Now, I'm not anti-cop like the group that produced the article, but I am anti-bad driver. And it seems to me that, even after the death of a 23-year-old woman, the Seattle Police Department does not take dangerous driving by its officers seriously enough. I might be wrong, and if folks have conflicting information, I'd love to hear it in the comments, but that's how it looks to me. Okay, this was supposed to be just a quick short video, but somehow they never end up that way. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching. I want to give a huge thanks to all of my channel members. I appreciate you so much. And a special shout out to my super STC supporters. Jonathan Reitveld, I Am Me 4615, Robert Lindsay 1270, Maria Brown 1062, Digiday 505, Maury Mark Siddell, and Bluto is watching. Thank you for your support. It means the world to me. If you'd like to join their hallowed ranks, you can click the join button on my page or follow the link in the description. If you'd prefer to support the channel with a one-time donation, you can buy me a coffee. And finally, if you're not able to support the channel financially, that is totally okay. I so appreciate all of the views and comments. I read them all even if I'm not always able to respond. So thank you all so much. That's it for tonight. Wishing you all a very happy new year, and I'll see you again soon.